everyone, welcome to our class video number 11. It's again another wonderful day where we get to learn about the if function, is function, and the logical tests. Please download this video down below this link and follow along as we work and learn new skills in this video. In this video, we get to see different examples of the if function. We will create a sales category using the if function, and then we'll create a standard pivot table to summarize the region sales. Here is a list of the things that we will cover in this video. We will cover the if function. The if function is one of the most used functions in Excel, and it allows you to make logical comparisons between a value and what you expect. An if function can have two results. The first result is if your comparison is true, and the second result is if your comparison is false. With the if function, you can put one of two things in a cell or formula. You can either put two numbers, two formulas, or you can put anything which could be a formula or a text. You can also put two words, which is also referred to as a text string, or a zero-length text string. And we will see how to do that when we start doing our examples. We will also learn the is functions. So even though many logical tests use comparative operators, there are some that do not use the comparative operators. An example would be in a situation where you would want to check whether the value in the cell is a number or a text, or the cell is blank, and in that case you will use the is function. The is function is not a comparative operator, but it allows you to ask a question and get a true or a false answer. The is function provides information about the value. For example, is the value a data type? Is it an error, or is it a formula? The is function can deliver a single output Boolean value, and it can spill the results in the neighboring cells as well. We'll also get to learn the logical tests or the logical formulas. With the logical function, it is a function that returns one or two possible values depending on whether a given condition is true or false. The two possible outcomes are called Boolean values. The condition is entered as an expression of the logical test. Logical functions use comparative operators. We'll also learn the AND logical test and the OR logical test. An AND logical test has two or more conditions. This logical test is used to test two or more logical tests to evaluate if all logical tests will be true. An OR logical test, this has two or more conditions as well. This logical test is used to check whether at least one test evaluates to be true. With the OR logical test, you are determining whether one or more of the logical tests will evaluate to be true. Let's now go to the comparative operators worksheet. Here I have listed the comparative operators, the phrases and the alternate phrases that are used on each of these comparative operators. I've also included the word examples for each of these comparative operators. In our example here, our handle is 3000. For example, on these comparative operators, equals 3000. On this one, is the comparative operator is greater than 3000. On this one, it's greater than or equal to 3000. And for this one, it will be less than 3000. This next one is less than or equal to 3000. And this comparative operator is testing not equal to 3000. Below here, I've also included logical test examples. Right here, for example, in this first row, the comparative operator used is included there. The logical test that we are testing in this example, and the two items that we are comparing. This is our comparison result. And in this example, we are comparing, is this item equal to that item? And the result is also shown here using that formula. And I've also included here the formula used on each of these tests that we are doing here. Now let's go to our first example in this video, and we will go to the if function worksheet. This is our first example in this video. And as I said, we use the if function to put one of two things in a cell. In our first example here, we have two different examples that we'll work on in this worksheet. In our first example, or the question that we are solving in this worksheet, Vivi is tracking her steps every day and wants a quick way to tell if the goal was met or not. We will use the if function to test the steps for each day. So if Vivi walks 10,000 steps or greater every day, the if function will return the text string goal met. Otherwise, it will return goal failed. In our first example here, we will type in the goal met and the goal failed in the formula. But in our second example right here, we will not type in anything in our formula, but we will use cell references for our performance indicator and for our handle. So right here, I'm in cell C9, and I will use the if function equals if. And we can see we have the logical test, which is the first argument. The logical test is a condition that is either true or false. So our logical test here is, did Vivi meet the 10,000 steps? So we will click on cell B9, and then we will use the comparative operator greater than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Greater than or equal to, our handle or the goal that has to be met is 10,000. We'll use the cell reference for 10,000, and I will lock that because I'm not using a spill formula, and I will copy my formula down the cells. So F4 to lock that, and I will put a comma to go to the next argument. The next argument is value if true. The value if true is the value returned by the function if the condition is true. So if Vivi met the 10,000 goal for every day, we want to return goal met. I will put the goal met in double quotes because this is a text. So double quotes, and I will type goal met, and then double quotes again. So that is text in our formula, and we have to put the text in double quotes. Now I'll put a comma to go to the next argument. So if Vivi did not meet the 10,000 steps daily, what we want to return? The value if false is the argument containing the value returned by the function if the condition is false. So for our condition, if the goal for 10,000 is not met, we want to return goal failed, and we'll put that in double quotes as well because again, this is a text. And now we can close our formula, Control Enter to remain in the same cell. And we can see the first day here, goal was met because the steps were 11,065. And you can see this is a tracking for the month of August. So what I will do, I'm still in the active cell right here where I did my formula. I'll come to the right side right there until I see that angry rabbit, and I will double click on it to copy my formula down. And I can go to the last cell, control down arrow, F2 to verify my formula. And I can see the condition right there was not met because it's 6,000 steps. My handle cell reference is correct right there. And you can see this is a track for the whole month of August. I will escape to get out of the edit mode. Now we'll do our second example right here. On this example here, I will do the dynamic spill array formula. Right here, I did the traditional formula where I had to lock the handle right there. But here, in both instances, I will use the dynamic spill array formula. On this one, I will use the cell references for our handle and the performance indicator right here. But on this one, I will use the spilled formula by typing in the text in our formula. Our formula is equals if, and then our logical test again, the steps for that day. And because this is a dynamic spill formula, I have to select all the cells that I will use in my formula. So I'm selecting all that. Those steps greater than or equal to the 10,000, which is our handle for the day. We have to meet 10,000 steps in a day. And then I put a comma. If our logical test result is true, then I want to put in that cell goal met. If our condition or if our result is false, what do we want to put in that cell? We want to put in that cell goal filled. So on this one, I'm not locking anything. I'm using the dynamic spilled array formula. So I will close that and enter. And again, I see it spills my answers. This is a spill formula. That's why we can see we didn't copy. We did only one formula here. And our answer spills to the neighboring cells. Now let's do the same thing here. We'll use the spill array formula again. But on this one, again, what I will do is the same thing that I did here. I'm typing in the goal met and the goal filled in the formula. I'm using the text string goal met or goal filled equals if our logical test, I'm selecting all this because this is an array formula, are those steps for each day greater than or equal to 10,000, which is our handle. If the result is true, then we want goal met, and I'll put that in double quotes because this is a text. And put a comma, go to the next argument. If our result is false, if we didn't meet the goal, what we want to return there, we want to return goal filled. So I'll put a text there and I'll put it in double quotes. And I can close our formula. And remember, this is a dynamic spilled array formula, so it will spill our answers into the neighboring cell. And I will enter. And you can see I have put the formulas up here for each of these functions that I did on these two examples. So that's the way you will do the if function, and you can see it's putting one of two things in the cell. If the goal is met, then it's putting that one thing, the goal is met, if the result is true. If the result is false, then it's putting the other thing, the result is false, so it's putting the goal failed, or we didn't meet our goal in that matter. Now let's go to our second example, which is if function 2 worksheet. On this worksheet, we have 5 different examples. On example number 3 and 4, our goal is we would like to track if we are within the budget for the month or not. If you are within the budget, the if function will return within budget. Otherwise, it will return over budget. We'll also calculate the amount over the budget for every month. On this example number 3, we are only using the logical function to return 1 or 2 possible values. We will create a logical formula resulting in either true or false. In this example, which is example number 4, we have 2 different things that we will calculate here. On the status column, we will use the if function to return 2 words on the status column. And if we are within the budget, we will return within the budget. If we are over, then we will return over budget. On the amount over column right here, we will use the if function to return a formula which will be the calculated amount over the budget and the number 0 if we are within the budget. So let's start with our third example, which is example number 3. I will click on cell E3 and I will start our logical test right there. Equals, I'm using a dynamic spill formula for these examples. And so equals amount spent, which is the actual amount spent. Is it less than or equal to? This time I'm using the less than comparative operator, or equal to the budgeted amount. And I will enter. So we can see the first one here. We went over the budget because this amount spent, it's not less than the budgeted amount. So now when we come to example number 4, instead of putting the logical true and false here, we will use the if function to return 2 possible things, within the budget or over the budget. In cell E18, and we'll start our formula, equals Our logical test is the same logical test that we used here in example number 3. Is the actual amount spent, and again this is a dynamic spilled array formula, is it less than or equal to the budgeted amount? That is our logical test. If our result is true, we put a comma. If our result is true, what do we want to return here? If the value is true, if our result is true, that means the actual amount spent is less than the budgeted amount. We want to return that we are within the budget. So I will select the cell reference for within the budget, which is cell H18. I'm not locking that because this is a dynamic spilled array formula. And I'll put a comma to go to the next argument, value if false. If our result turns out to be false, if the actual amount spent is greater than the budgeted amount, then we want to return we are over the budget. I will click on cell I18, and now I can close our formula and enter. And we can see right here on the month of December, we are over the budget. The month of January, we are within the budget. That means the actual amount that we spent is less than the budgeted amount. Now on this column, the amount over, we want to use the if function to return a formula. We'll do equals if our logical test, again, it's the same logical test, is the amount spent less than or equal to the budgeted amount. That is our logical test. I'll put a comma to go to the next argument. The value if true. If our result comes out to be true, what do we want to return there? If our result comes out to be true, we want to return 0 because we are within the budget. If our result comes out to be false, I'll put a comma to go to that argument. If our result is false, that means we are over budget. We want to return a formula there, and our formula will be how much are we over the budget. That means we'll get the actual amount spent minus the budgeted amount. Now let's close our formula and enter. And we can see right here, we are over 300. So 1200 minus 900, we went over the budget by 300. On the month of January, we didn't go over the budget. So we have a 0 because we specified we want to return a 0 if we are within the budget. For the following month, we went over by $100. So this is a calculated formula for the if function. Now let's go to our 5th example on this worksheet. Our question here, we would like to track if the customers owe the company money. If the customer owe a balance, the if function will return the amount owed, otherwise return no balance. We have 3 different calculations that we will do here. On this first one here, we will calculate the amount owed. And then on this next one here, we will show nothing or balance owed. So if they don't owe anything, we will show nothing. If they owe any amount, we will show balance owed. And then for this other one, we will show the balance amount owed, or we will show nothing. So if they owe a balance, we will show how much they owe. And if they don't owe any balance, then we will show nothing. We have our handle that we are using here, balance owed. So let's click on cell E32 and let's do our first calculation there. So on this one, we are not using the if function. We're just calculating the amount owed. So equals the invoice amount minus the amount that the customer paid. That way, we can see if we have any balances on any of the amount the customer owes. Now right here, we will use the if function to see if they owe any balance. So if they don't owe any balance, we will show nothing. If they owe a balance, we will show balance owed. So we'll use the if function equals if our logical test amount owed is less than or equal to 0. That's our logical test. So if the amount owed is less than or equal to 0, we put a comma. If it's true, what do we want to return? We want to show nothing. So to show nothing is a zero length text, which you'll put in double quotes. So double quotes, that's a zero length text string. And I'll put a comma to go to the next argument. So our next argument is value if false. If our logical test result turns out to be false, we want to show balance owed. So we'll use the cell reference for balance owed, I32, and I will not lock that because I'm using a dynamic spilled array formula. I will close that and enter. And we can see only the customers that owe the balance are showing here as balance owed. For the customers that don't owe anything or have a negative amount, we are showing here they don't owe anything. That means we are showing nothing. And we used the zero length text string. Now let's show here the balance amount owed or show nothing if they don't owe any balance. Again, we will use the if function here equals if, and our logical test amount owed, is it less than or equal to 0? That's our logical test. If it's less than or equal to 0, again, we want to show nothing. Showing nothing, we will put the zero length text string. So double quotes for that. And I'll put a comma for our next argument. If the result is false or if the value turns out to be false, what do we want to show? We want to show how much they owe. So how much they owe is calculated on this column, amount owed. So I will just select that column. That's what I want to return there. And now I will close that and enter. And I can see here the amount each of these customers owe. And if they don't owe anything, I can see I'm just showing nothing for the customers that don't owe anything. Now this here is a helper column to help us calculate the amount owed. But we can calculate or we can show the balance, amount owed, or show nothing without having to create or without having to include the amount owed helper column right there. So what I will do another calculation here where I will not use the amount owed column in my formula. I will select that and I will just click on the format painter and I will click on cell K31 because all I needed here was the formatting. I also need to copy that, Control C and Control V. I'll copy that there. I didn't need the formulas because I need to do a different formula right here where I'm not using the amount owed column here as a helper column. So we'll do equals if, and our logical test, we want to calculate the amount owed. So that means we will get the invoice amount minus the amount paid. Is this less than or equal to 0? So is it less than or equal to 0? So that is our logical test. If that is less than or equal to 0, what do we want to show? That means they don't owe anything. If they don't owe anything, we want to show nothing. That means we're using the zero length text string for that. So the double quotes for our zero length text string, and then we'll put a comma to go to the next argument. If they owe the balance, what do we want to show? This time, if they owe the balance, we want to show how much they owe. That means I will also do a formula calculation for this. So I will get the amount for the invoice, which is the invoice amount, and I will minus the amount paid. That way, we're getting the amount that they owe, or we're getting the balance that they owe. And I will close that and enter. And now we can see we did the same thing that we did here, but here we are using the helper column for amount owed. But here we are not using any helper column. We're just using the if function and returning formula. And in our logical test, if I double click that, in our logical test, we are using a formula too. In our value if true, we're just using the zero length text string, which is the double quotes. And then the value if false, again, we are using a formula, or we are returning a formula for this argument. I'll press escape to get out of the edit mode. Now let's go to our sixth example. And on this example, you are a sales and marketing manager and you would like to give a bonus to all employees whose sales are greater than 25,000. You would like to track which employee gets the bonus and how much of the bonus they get. The contract reads that they will receive a 10% bonus if the sales are greater than 25,000. Otherwise, they will just receive the 2%. So on this one, it's just only if their sales are greater than 25,000. We can see this one right here. It's 24,999.99. So for this case, because they didn't reach 25,000, they will not get the 10% bonus. So let's do the logical test right here. Again, we're using the if function. So equals if our logical tests are these sales greater than, this time it's just greater than, are they greater than 25,000, which is our handle to receive the bonus. And I will use the cell reference for the 25,000 because that might change. It may be 20,000, it may be 30,000 in a different month, it may change. So for now, we're using 25,000 and that's why I'm using a cell reference for that. So that's our logical test. I'll put a comma to go to the next argument. If the sales amount are greater than 25,000, then they will receive a 10% bonus. So again, the bonus may change, and I'm using a cell reference for that because that may change. Selecting G52, I'm not locking that because I'm using the dynamic spilled array formula. I put a comma to go to the next argument. Now, if the value is false, if they didn't meet the greater than 25,000, they only get a 2%. Again, I'm using a cell reference for that, H52, and now I will close my formula and enter. And we can see they are greater than 25,000, they receive the 10%. Now, what about if we put 25,000 and see if they will receive any bonus? We see the 25,000 doesn't receive the 10% bonus. They only get 2% because they are not greater than 25,000. So if it was 25,001 cent, they will receive the 10%. And let's change that and see if that will update as well. 25,000.01. Now that changes to 10%. So if their sales amount are greater than, only if they are greater than 25,000, then they will receive the bonus of 10%. Now in our example number 7 here, instead of showing now the bonus commission percent, we will calculate how much they will receive in dollar. So this is an if function to return a formula. We'll do equals if, again we're using the same logical tests, is the sales amount greater than 25,000? If it is, we want to return 10%. If it's not, we want to return 2%. Now we want a calculated formula here because we want to see how much of the bonus in dollar that they will receive. So I will close that. And because this percentage bonus is a percentage of their sales amount, I will multiply that by their sales amount right there. And now I will enter. And we can see how much they will receive if they are paid amount in dollar instead of just doing the how much percentage commission. So this up here is the bonus commission percentage, but then this down here, we calculated how much they will get for their bonus for each of these employees that met the 25,000 handle. So that's the way you will calculate the if functions. And we have seen different examples on this worksheet, on the if function worksheet, on the different examples that we're calculating using the if function. Now we will go and do our next example where we are doing the AND logical test and the OR logical test. So let's click on AND OR logical test worksheet and see our next examples on this worksheet. On this example, we are using the AND logical test. Our question reads, you work at the enrollment office and would like to post honors roll on the transcript for the students who have completed more than 12 credits and have a cumulative GPA of 3.5 and above. They are eligible to have the honors roll posted on their transcript. Otherwise, they are not eligible. We will create an AND logical formula that shows if they are eligible for the honors roll. Now, as I said earlier, the AND logical test is used to test two or more logical tests to evaluate if all logical tests will be true. Now, with this test, there are 4 possible answers, and the only true will result in a true value. From the AND logical test, all these other possible answers, if it's true, false, false, true, or false, false, that will result in a false value. So the only one that will result in a true value will be the one that meets both conditions, which is they have more than 12 credits and their cumulative GPA is 3.5 and above. Now, if you can remember, we did the conditions earlier in our videos for this class where we covered the aggregate functions. And we know that the aggregate functions that can perform the AND logical test and the functions that we covered, we did the countives where we are counting the numbers with one or more condition. We did the summives where we were adding the numbers with one or more conditions. We did the average ifs, the mean ifs, and the max ifs. Now here we are just doing the AND condition, but it has to meet both conditions have to be true. So I will go to cell G10 and I will do our formula in our cell G10. Our formula is AND logical test, so equals and you can see here AND checks whether all arguments are true and returns true if all arguments are true. So we'll tap to select that. So our first logical test is the college level credits greater than 12. And I will lock that. We don't use the spill formulas with the AND logical test. So I will lock that, F4 to lock that, and I'll put a comma. And now I will go to my next logical test. And my second logical test is the cumulative GPA greater than or equal to 3.5. So the cumulative GPA cell reference right there, is it greater than or equal to 3.5? So it has to be either 3.5 or above 3.5 for them to be eligible for the honors roll. And I will lock that, F4 to lock that, and I'll close our formula, Control Enter to remain in the same cell, and I will double click to copy our formula down. So you can see this student, they have 60 credits. Their GPA is 3.6. That means they get a true, they are eligible for the honors roll. This student right here, they have 70 credits. Their cumulative GPA is 2.25. That means the answer here came out to be false because even though they have more than 12 college level credits, they do not have a GPA of 3.5 and above, because it's not two truths. One is a true and one is a false. So they get a false here. They are not eligible for the honors roll. Now let's go to our next example, which we are doing the OR logical test. And in this example, our question reads, the Business and Accounting Department has a scholarship that is offered only to students whose program of study is business or accounting. We will create a logical formula, which is OR logical formula. I will edit this here. So we'll create an OR logical formula that shows true for the students eligible for the scholarship and false if they are not eligible for the scholarship. So our formula here will be equals OR, and you can see it checks whether any of the arguments are true and returns true or false. It returns false only if all arguments are false. So if both arguments are false, if both logical tests are false, then it will return a false. If one of these logical tests come out to be true, then it will return a true. So we'll tap to select that. And our first logical test is the program of study equal to accounting. Again, I'm not doing a spill formula for this one, so I need to lock the accounting cell reference, F4 to lock that. And then I'll go to my second logical test, which is my second argument. Is the program of study equal to business? And I will lock that. Now, also, the OR logical test, it has also 4 possible answers. The only one that will be false, false, it will result to a false. All the others, which is true, false, false, true, 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 all those will result to a true value. Because we're doing, if it's business or if it's accounting, then we will get a true. If it's not business and it's not accounting, which will be false. So I'll close that, Control Enter, and I will double click and copy that down. So this one here is business. It's not accounting, it's business. So it's either business or accounting, and that's why we're getting a true, because the one logical test is true. Same thing here with accounting, which is one of the logical tests is true. That means we're getting a true here. For the biology, we're getting a false here because it didn't meet either of the logical tests. It's not accounting and it's not business. So with the and the OR logical tests, this can have up to 255 logical tests entered as arguments. And these arguments, as we have seen here, if I press F2 to go to the edit mode, the logical test, they can be up to 255. And you can see they're separated by commas. The order in which we enter these arguments does not matter, because both functions, they are looking at how many true values that it can be delivered. So all these logical functions, they can create logical tests created with comparison or comparative operators, can be numeric values, the is function, and any other function or formula that delivers a Boolean or numeric value. So just note here, we didn't use the spill formula for this and we did not use the spill formula for the OR logical test. So the AND, the OR, and NOT functions, you cannot use the spill formula for that. With these formulas, we just use the old traditional formulas. So you have to lock your cell references for that and use the absolute and relative cell references. And then we have to manually copy the formula down to the column. So if you want to use the AND logical test or the OR logical test and you do not want to lock, Then you can use the table formula where you're changing your data here to an Excel table. And you don't have to copy the formula down because the Excel table formula will automatically copy the formulas for you. I press escape to get out of the edit mode, and I needed to do some edit here. So this one was create an and logical tests. We do have 2 more examples in this worksheet. So let's scroll down to example number 10. And our question reads, the Business and Accounting Department has a scholarship that is offered only to students whose their program of study is business or accounting with a cumulative GPA of 2.5 and above. Create an and logical test that shows true for the students eligible for the scholarship and false if they are not eligible for the scholarship. In our example number 9 here, there was no requirement for a cumulative GPA. But in this example, we have a requirement for a cumulative GPA. So we will use the and or logical test for this one because their program of study has to be accounting or business and their cumulative GPA has to be 2.5 and above. So we'll go to cell G62 and I will start our formula, and our formula is equals, and we'll tap to select that. Our logical test is the GPA greater than or equal to 2.5, and I will lock that. And now let's go to our next logical test, and this one we're doing or because they have to be either in accounting or business. So I will type or and I will tap to select that function. And here we're doing is their program of study equal to accounting, lock that, put a comma to go to the next logical test. Is their program of study equal to business, lock that using F4 key and close our formula. And that parenthesis is closing the OR logical test. So we need to close again so that we close now the entire formula, including the AND logical test. Control Enter, and then come all the way to the right until you see the angry rabbit. Double click on that to send our formula down. So now if we see here, that's nothing, so it's false. They're not meeting the program of study condition. We see the business here, they have 90 credits and their cumulative GPA is 3.4. That means they're meeting the condition. And now let's see, these are the student right here. So this is a business student. They are meeting the criteria for OR because they are business or accounting for their program of study. And I select that. But then we see their cumulative GPA is 2.4. That means they are not meeting the cumulative GPA condition. Their cumulative GPA has to be 2.5 and above. And that's why here we're getting a false. Yes, they meet the program of study condition, but they don't meet the cumulative GPA condition. This one is delivering a false for us. So now let's scroll down and do our example number 11, which is our last example in this worksheet. Our question reads, the graduation office would like to track the students that are eligible to apply for graduation. Students are eligible to apply for graduation if they have completed 75 or more college level credits. So it's 75 or more college level credits and have a cumulative GPA of 2.0 or above. So on this one, we are creating an AND logical test. So we'll do equals and tab to select that. Our first logical test is the cumulative GPA greater than or equal to 2.0. And then we need to lock that, F4 to lock that, comma to go to the next argument or the next logical test. Is the college level credit greater than or equal to 75 credits? Remember, we need to lock that. And now we can close our formula, Control Enter, and we can double click and copy that down. So for our first student here, they do have 45 credits. Their GPA is above 2.0, but they're not eligible to apply for graduation because they only have 45 credits. This student here has 75 credits. They meet the first condition here. They also have 3.6 for their GPA, so they meet the next condition right there. Thus, this student is eligible to apply for graduation. This student right here, they have 90 college level credits, but then their cumulative GPA is 1.9. That means they cannot graduate. They need to meet a cumulative GPA of 2.0. So this student is not eligible to apply for graduation. So now we have seen how to use the AND logical test and also how to combine the AND and OR logical tests. And I will edit here because we used both AND and OR logical tests. So let me edit there. So now let's go to our next example where we are doing the is functions. So click on the is functions worksheet and we will see how to do the is functions right here. In this worksheet, we have example 12, 13, and 14. As I said earlier, the is functions do not use the comparative operators. In our example here, we are checking whether the value in the cell is a number. We're also checking whether the cell is empty. And we are checking also, is the value in the cell a text? You may also want to check whether there is a formula in a cell. And as I click on cell D2, on my formula bar right here, you can see I have used is formula. Is there a formula in cell D7? So if there's a formula in cell D7, the formula that I have used here will show in cell D2. As I said earlier in the introduction of this video, the is function allows you to ask a question to get a true or a false answer. I do have a table here that has the different is functions that we can use in Excel. So these are the different is functions that we can use. And these are the questions that the function is asking. Now let's click on cell D7 and we will do our first is function here. And with the is function, we can use a dynamic spilled array formula. Here, the question that we are asking, is there a number in the sales column right here? So we'll do equals is number. Once I select is number, it checks whether a value is a number and returns true or false. I will tab to select that. And as I said, my value here is the sales column. I'm using a dynamic spilled array formula. I will close that. And once I enter that, you can see there is no number here. We get a false. There's a number here. We get a true. So this is not a number because we can see from our default aligning, if you remember, this alignment is for the text, is aligned to the left and not to the right. If it's a number, the aligning could be on the right. And that's why you can see right here, it's not a number, it's a text. So the value here is false. Now on example number 13, we want to use the is blank to check if a cell is blank. Again, we are checking the sales column right here. We're using the dynamic spilled array formula equals is blank. And you can see it checks whether a reference is to an empty cell and returns true or false. So I'll tap to select that. And my value, again, is the sales column. I'm selecting all the cells that I'm using in this formula. Close that and enter. Right here, we have an empty cell. So that cell is blank. That's why we're getting a true here. Right here, we have an empty cell. So this cell is blank. That's why we're getting a true right here. The next example, which is example number 14, we want to check again the values in the sales column. Is that a text or a number. So we will use the function isText equals isText. It checks whether a value is text and returns true or false. So I'll tap that. Our value here, again, we are selecting the entire column. We're using all those cells in our formula. We'll close that and enter. And we can see here, this is not a text. We're getting a false here. This is a text and we're getting a true right there. This is a text. We're getting a true right there. This too is not a number. It's a text. We're getting a true right here. But this one right here, we're getting a false. That means this is a number that the default alignment has been changed. And that's why I said earlier in our class, do not change the default alignment that we have in Excel. If it's a number, let it align as a number. Don't change the default alignment. But you can see here that is a number. And that's why here we're getting a false for the text and a true for the number. Now you can see up here, I have the formula if is formula. So I will delete that and I will show how to enter that formula. Equals if, and I will tap that. Our logical test, which will deliver a true or a false, is the is function. We are asking, is there a formula in the cell? So is formula, is there a formula in this cell, which is D7? Is there a formula in that reference? And I will close that. Remember, you have to close that. And now you put a comma to go to the next argument. So if there is a formula, what do we want to show? So if it is a formula, we want to show the formula text. So I will type here formula text and returns a formula as a string. So I will tap to select that. And then I will select that reference again because I want to show the formula that is in that cell. I will close that. And then I'll put a comma to go to the next argument. If there is no formula there, I want to show nothing. So to show nothing, we're using the zero length text string, which is double quotes, and I will close that. And now once I enter, you can see the formula that we have used right here is the formula that is showing up above here. And this is the same thing that I have done for these cells right there. So that's how you will do the is function. And with the is function, again, we're just asking a question which will give us a true or a false answer. Now let's go to the checkbook register. Click on the checkbook register worksheet. Now that we have learned the if function and is function, we will use both functions here on this example. We will calculate three different formulas here. So I'm in cell G9 and I will do my first formula here using the if and is functions. So equals if is number. Is there a number in the date column? I will select cell C9, that's our value, and I will close that. This is our logical test. If there's a number in the date column, what do we want to return? We will do a formula return on this one because our question here, we are doing our own bookkeeping and we are tracking and calculating our checkbook balance. So we're creating a formula in the cell that will calculate our checkbook balance when we enter a date in the date column, and it will show nothing when a date is not entered. So because we have a date there, if there's a date there, what do we want to do? We want to do a calculation here. We'll get the balance and then we will adjust with the transactions for that particular date. So we will add any deposit that happened on that day and we will deduct any withdrawal that happened on that date as well. So that's the value if true. The next argument, value if false. If there's no date entered on the date column, we want to show nothing. So we'll do the double quotes to show nothing. And then I will close that and enter. And now I can copy my formula down. And we can see here, it shows like this cell is empty or blank, but this cell is not empty. There's a formula here. You can see on the formula bar right here that there's a formula. And if I press F2, you can see that there's a formula here. It's getting the balance from the previous date. And if there's a date that is entered here, then it will add the deposit that was made and deduct the withdrawal if there was any withdrawal that was made. I will escape and I will test this. I will enter today's date. The balance is calculating here. So if we were to enter any amount here for the deposit, I will do 4,000 and we'll see how this calculates. So once I enter, that changes to 48,286.02. Now let's do our next formula here in this worksheet. On this one, we're using if is blank. We're doing equals if the question we are asking is the date column blank. So our value here will be C9. Is C9 blank? I will close that. So if it is blank, we want to show nothing. So put a comma, double quotes to show nothing, and then put a comma. If there is a date in that column, we want to do our calculation. So we want our formula to return the calculation. We'll get the balance. We'll add any deposit that happened on that date, and then we will minus any withdrawal that happened on that date. And then I will close our formula here. Control Enter, and you can see it's the same answer because we are calculating the same thing, just using different formulas. And I will copy this formula down. And again, you can see same thing. We have the formula here, but since we don't have any date that is entered here, our transaction is not calculating right there. So if we were just to enter a withdrawal here, so if I just do, we withdrew $2,000, that won't update because we do not have a date that is entered in the date column. Now let's do our third formula here. And our third formula, we're doing equals if, and we're doing a logical test for this one. If cell C9 is equal to nothing, which is double quotes to show nothing. So the double quotes is showing nothing. This is our zero length text string. I'll put a comma. That's our logical test. If cell C9 shows nothing, that means there's no date entered there. What do we want to show? We want to show nothing as well. So if there is a date entered there, we want to return our calculation. So we will do our formula to return our calculation there. We'll get the balance. We add any deposit that happened on that particular date, and then we will deduct any withdrawals that happened on that particular date. And I will close our formula, Control Enter, and now I will copy my formula down. And you can see it's the same calculation, same answers, but 3 different formulas. Now let's enter a date here because we have the 2,000 withdrawal here, but it's not calculating because we don't have a date here. Now let's enter a date here. I will change this date to November 1st, 24, and I will do the date for today here. And once I enter, you will see that our calculations will update on all these 3 different formulas. So now watch that. Once I enter, there it goes. We have all those formulas calculating. So we're using 3 different formulas to do the same calculation. So whichever formula you like, you can use this formula when you're doing your checkbook tracking. So now let's go to our next example, which is inventory tracker. Click on the inventory tracker worksheet. This is our example number 16 in this video. So in this example, our question reads, you run a small business and you would like to create an inventory tracking sheet that tracks your inventory. So here I have included an inventory table. The number of items purchased columns, it contains the number of inventory items that were purchased. So this is an addition to your inventory, this column right there. The number of items sold, it contains the number of inventory items that were sold. So this is a deduction, or it's a minus to your inventory. So we'll create a formula that can calculate the inventory balance when a date is entered in the date column. And then we'll copy our formula down because when a date is not entered, we want to show nothing. So we'll do the same thing that we did in our checkbook register. And we will start with the if is number equals if is number. And our value again is the date column. Close that. I put a comma. If there's a date in that column, what we want to do, same thing like we did in the checkbook register. We want to get the balance. We want to add any items that came into our inventory, any items that we purchased. And again, it has to be the transactions for that particular date. And then we want to deduct any items that we sold on that particular date. We'll put a comma to go to the next argument. If there is no date that is entered, that means the value is false. If it's false, we want to show nothing. So double quotes, and close that. And Control Enter to remain in the same cell. So we'll copy this formula down. And we can see we have the formula in these cells right there that will get the balance from the previous date. And then it will adjust with the transactions that will happen on that date. I'll press Escape, and we'll do the same thing for our balance here, which is the second formula here. And I will type 257 here as I would like to use this number from up here on this cell. So I will do equals, if we're using is blank here, is blank, and our value again is the date column. If that value is blank, close that and put a comma. If it's blank, we want to show nothing. So double quotes, and then put a comma for the next argument. If there's a date there, which means if it's not blank, we want to return a formula here. So we're doing a calculation. We'll get the balance. This time I'm using that balance there. We'll add any items that we purchased on that particular day. And then we will deduct any items that we sold on that particular day. We'll close that, Control Enter. Again, you can see it's the same answer, but different formula. I'll copy that down. Now right here, I will do the same thing. I will enter 257. And here, I will use the same formula like I did the logical test. We'll do equals, if, and our logical test, just like we did in our previous example, is the date column equal to nothing, which is the double quotes. That's our logical test. If there's nothing in the date column, put a comma. If there's nothing, we want to show nothing. So again, double quotes. If there is a date in the date column, we want to return our formula calculation. So we'll get the balance, and then we'll adjust that with the transactions that happened that day. So plus any inventory that we purchased and came into our store that day, minus or deduct any sales that we made on that particular date. And I will close that, Control Enter. Again, we're getting the same answers right there, and I will copy this down. Now let's test if our formula is working. I'm just gonna enter an inventory that came in, and I will do a big number here. Let's do 500. And we can see it didn't change anything because we do not have a date entered in the date column. Now, once we enter a date here, let's enter today's date, 11/2/24. And once I enter this, you will see that the values here or our calculations here will update and these values will change. So I'll enter that. And as you can see, our calculations updated. And now the value here is 894. It did an addition for the 500 in all three formulas. Now, before we go to the sales category worksheet, right here, when there was no formula here, I'll delete that so I can show you. Right here, it says NA, and if I press F2, you can see it says formula text. So that means if there is no formula here, it's giving me an NA error. So if I don't want to show the NA error when there is no formula here, I will delete that formula here and I will enter a different formula equals if NA, so formula text, and the reference will be that cell that has the formula. So that means if there's no formula here, nothing will show. And then I'll put a comma, value if NA, I want to show nothing. So if there's no formula there, just show nothing. If there's a formula there, then show the formula. So double quotes, and I will close that and enter. Now it's showing nothing. Now if I'm gonna copy my formula up, and now my formula shows right there. So you can use the if is formula function like I showed you in our last example, or you can use the if NA function if you want to show the formula that you have used on any particular cell that has a formula. And let me do that again here so you can see what I did. So equals if NA. So the value that I want to show here is the formula text. And I will select the reference. If there's a formula there, then show the formula there. If there's no formula, then show nothing. Double quotes, and close that. So that's how you will do. This is the second formula if you want to show what formula you have used in a particular cell. I'll close that. Now we can see our formula. Now let's go to our sales category. This will be our last example in this video. This is example number 17. Now in this last example for this video, we want to create an if logical formula that returns average if the sales are greater than or equal to 300. Otherwise, return below average. The company can change the category at any time, so we are sure that we are following the Excel golden rule, and that's why we have the cell references or the formula inputs that we will use in a different cell, and we have labeled that, and we will use this in our formula here with a cell reference. We will then make a cross-tabulated standard pivot table for the sales summary report that shows the region in the rows area and the sales category in the columns area and the sales in the values area. So let's do our formula here. I'm in cell F8 and we will do our if function right here equals if our logical test. If the sales are greater than or equal to 300, I will use the dynamic spilled array formula here. Control Shift down arrow. We have a lot of rows here. We have a lot of records. We have about 73,000 records. So Control backspace to go back to the active cell. So if our logical test, that means if the sales are greater than or equal to, and we will use the cell reference for that. Our handle is 300. If our sales are greater than or equal to 300, what we want to return, I'll put a comma. So if it's greater than 300, we want to return average. Our sales are greater than or equal to 300, we will return average in that cell. And then we'll put a comma. If our sales are less than 300, what do we want to return? We want to return in that cell below average. I will select K8 as our cell reference. and then I will close that. And once I enter, because this is a dynamic spilled array formula, our answers spill down to these neighboring cells. So this cell is 305, that means it's average. This sales is below $300, that means it's below average. Now the next thing that we need to do is to create a cross-tabulated pivot table. So we're creating a cross-tabulated pivot table. I'm clicking on any one cell right here, and this is a standard pivot table. So Alt-N-V-T for a keyboard shortcut. And we are creating our pivot table in this same worksheet. So we want to place our pivot table in this same worksheet. So I will select existing worksheet and my location will be cell N7 and I will click OK. And let me expand this so I can see all the fields here. We want the region in the rows area. And then we want the sales category in the columns area. And then we want the sales in the values area. Now we have a report summarizing our region sales. We will add the number formatting. So I will click on any of these values, right click, number format, and I will do the number 0 decimals. And I'll check that box for the 1,000 comma separator and click OK. And up here on the sales, I will like to add a dollar symbol right there. So I can either type there or come here to the formula bar and type from the formula bar, or I can double click that and make changes there. And I can expand this column because I want to see the dollar symbol right there. The next thing that I need to do is to name my pivot table. And I'm naming this pivot table region sales. So I'm making sure that I'm selected in the pivot table. And my pivot table analyze tab on my ribbon is active right there. And go to the pivot table group. And here I will name the pivot table region sales. If you would like to change the design for your pivot table, you can. You will go to design and then you will change the style from there. If also your pivot table design is not showing the report layout as tabular, you will still be in the design tab right there. And then on the layout group, you will click show in tabular form. So mine is already showing in tabular form. I don't have to click that. And I will drag this to this side so it's not blocking us. And if you do not want to see the pivot table fields, you can go to the pivot table analyze tab on your ribbon and click on the field buttons that will hide the pivot table fields. And if you click on it, again, you see the pivot table fields. So we did our number formatting, we are showing our report in tabular form, and we named the pivot table. I didn't want to change the style, so I didn't change the style right there. We have now come to the end of our M365 Excel Basics video number 11, where we have worked on 17 different examples. We have learned the if and is functions, as well as different logical functions that we have covered in this video. That is it for this video. It's bye for now, and I will see you in our next class video.